I know Premier Minns has been pushing more so-called anti-hate speech laws. Again, this is a cop-out. You cannot legislate away hate. We have some of the most draconian anti-free speech laws in the Western world. That didn't stop this happening. More anti-free speech laws won't stop this happening again. And the issue is not so much what people are saying, though that is a problem. The problem is that we have thousands of people in our country who believe this stuff, and you cannot legislate this away. There is no anti-radicalisation program that's going to stop this. And the other issue here is many of these people are citizens of our country, some of whom are natural-born citizens. And I don't think any of our political leaders are actually willing to acknowledge and to deal with this problem that we have imported hate, and you can't legislate that issue away.
Well, 2 points in response, Dan. First of all, I agree with you. We don't need more laws against hate speech. We need the existing laws enforced. And I think that there's been quite a double standard when it comes to enforcing hate speech laws. If you or I say something which is offensive to Muslims, for instance, we're likely to be in all sorts of trouble. But radical Islamists can say what they like in terms of globalising the Intifada, murdering the IDF, F the Jews, gas the Jews, etc., and nothing happens. So I think there's nothing wrong with the laws as they stand. They just need to be enforced equally as opposed to partially. So that's the first point to make. The second point to make is, yes, we should not import hatreds from overseas. And this is why the government's, I suppose, insouciance about issuing 3,000 tourist visas to people from Gaza, about bringing back the so-called ISIS brides, is so difficult to fathom. I mean, Gaza is a terrorist-controlled war zone, or at least most of it has been until recently. Why on earth would we bring people to this country from Gaza without the sorts of security checks which are simply impossible at this time? Why would we issue them visas without being absolutely confident that they are people who accept our values and embrace our way of life? So we have failed as a nation. I mean, when you look, Dan, at the post-war migration program and compare it with more recent official attitudes, the post-war migration program was a great success because the new Australians, as we called them back then, were expected to integrate from day one and ultimately to assimilate. And the idea was that their children would go to normal Australian schools and they would become first-class Australians, completely comfortable with the Australian way of life. Then, in the Whitlam era and beyond, we had this doctrine of multiculturalism. Now, if multiculturalism simply meant that people would adapt to Australia in their own way and at their own pace, I suppose that's fair enough. But what it has often tended to mean is that the government funds people who become, if you like, ethnic activists, excuse me, who have a vested interest in keeping people separate from the Australian mainstream and who have a vested interest in claiming that there's been discrimination, that there's been racism, even though modern Australia, the Anglo-Celtic core culture, is the world's most welcoming. And even though modern Australia, the Judeo-Christian value system, is the world's most universal. So I think that for a couple of generations now, we've been essentially on the wrong track. The terms I often use are Team Australia, which is what everyone should be expected to join from the moment they get here, or Hotel Australia, which is what too many of our recent migrants are living in. For instance, the senior of this week's terrorists has apparently been living in this country for almost 30 years without ever becoming a permanent resident, without becoming a citizen, without making the citizenship pledge to Australia and its people. And he's been allowed to do that. Well, in the time he's been here, he's made many trips back to the subcontinent. He's made, it seems, a recent trip to the Philippines, where it's quite likely that he engaged in terrorist training at Islamist camps in the southern Philippines. This is not what Australia should be all about. I mean, the Australian project since 1788 has been to welcome people to a better life on the basis that they wholeheartedly embrace life in this country and they wholeheartedly embrace Australian values, which again I stress, it's essentially an Anglo-Celtic culture and it's absolutely a Judeo-Christian ethos, and at the heart of the Judeo-Christian ethos is the idea that all people are equal in the eyes of God. We don't discriminate on the basis of religion or race or gender. We have complete freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of religion. And I have to say, Dan, that it's very difficult for people who adhere to a strict version of Islam to also accept the Australian way of life.